Alright guys, so this is day 4 of working on this car. Like I said, I'm still waiting on bolts to come in from Subaru, so in the meantime, I figured I'd work on a few other projects. Now, before I get a ton of emails and comments about me drilling out the bolts, that didn't work for 2 reasons. First of all, I really didn't have good enough bits. All I had were standard drill bits. I think one of them was good enough for hardened steel. But drilling out hardened steel bolts is one of the most difficult things to do, so I didn't have the right bits and the store was closed. Second of all, my grandfather's drill press, while it works and while it's good, it doesn't have a speed low enough to deal with drilling through steel. When you're cutting through steel, you need to go very slow so that it actually cuts through the steel. Otherwise, it just heats up the bit and it damages the cutting blade, and it doesn't go anywhere, and it just generates more and more heat, and you don't have a chance of doing anything at that point. So unfortunately, I just didn't have the tools that were needed to cut through steel. Like I said, I'm just going to take it to a shop and have them do it, because I'd much rather them do it right than me screw up calipers, because that would be a huge disaster. But in the meantime, while I'm waiting on bolts to come in and when I have my calipers at the shop, I figured I'd do some other projects. I am reinstalling this skid plate. Now, this skid plate here I bought several years ago, and I had it installed on the car for a couple months before I removed it. The 2 issues I had with it is, number 1, I didn't have spacers with it, so it was rubbing along, it was rubbing against my drain valve. I have a Fumoto drain valve, and I'll show you that when I get under the car. And number 2 is it doesn't have any access holes cut into it. So anytime I'd change my oil, I would have to remove the whole skid plate, which is a pain in the ass. So today I'm going to mount it up, see where I need to cut access holes. I'm going to cut those out with a body saw, and then I'll be able to mount this. And since I have new hardware with spacers, I shouldn't have any rubbing issues, which is going to be awesome. So I'm under my car now, and for frame of reference, this is my front bumper. As you can see, I have my bumper and the front lip sandwiched between 2 pieces of angle iron. This is actually angle aluminum. And for me, this has worked out much better than even just using bolts through the plastic. These bumpers are very soft plastic, so if you hit something small, more often than not, the bolts like to pull through the bumper. So this is a much more secure way of doing it. And in my experience, anytime I've hit something, it's jacked up my bumper anyhow. So I really don't care if it takes off part of my bumper when I hit something. It's pretty much screwed either way. Here are my headers, and this is the slip joint that More Performance was so kind to weld up for me. As I said in my other video, sometimes they leak over time and you need to get them welded up. Once these headers are on your specific car, there are no problems with having them welded, as long as the shop that does it does the fitment right and they make sure that everything is where it should be. Moore installed these several times before they completely welded them to make sure that they would fit and I wouldn't have any issues. If you swing around, here is my Fumoto drain valve. I will be installing one on my mom's WRX whenever I do my next oil change on her car. But I've been running this for, I don't even know, probably 5 years now, and I absolutely love it. Just to drain your oil or to check your oil, you have to lift up this little tab here and it slides over a 1/4 turn. It's a little ball valve. And it is much, much better than dealing with the stupid drain bolts. You don't have to worry about gaskets or anything. This never comes off the car. So this is what was rubbing against my skid plate. Now that I'm cutting an access hole, it shouldn't rub at all. But I'm also going to cut an access hole for my filter here so that I don't have any issues draining that as well. Now the skid plate mounts up with 5 bolts. I have 3 bolts that go into the front rail, the front subframe here, and I have 2 bolts that come, I believe, in these 2 holes here. We'll see when I mount up the plate, but that's all that holds it in. And I have 2 spacers here that will go to space it down, and I will have 3 along this front rail.
I didn't think we could fall in love, broken from the start, chained to our past. We had closed hearts. We are breaking free. It's just you and me.
Sorry about that. My camera cut out because the SD card filled up while I was filming and I did not notice. However, I just finished cutting my second hole. With this one, I actually tried a different technique where I drill a whole bunch of holes and then I just connect it with the body cutter. Because that blade, as thin as it still cannot turn very well. So these holes look a little bit rough, but I don't care. It's going to be under my car. You're never going to see it, and I'm not a metal fabricator. So now all I'm going to do is try and use my Dremel tool and try and round off the edges so at least there's nothing sharp and it looks a little bit better.
They were blinded, tried to deny us, didn't think we were following our hearts. We are breaking free, it's just you and me. We might fall apart, now we're running away with
Alright guys, here's my skid plate installed. Like I said, these are not the best looking holes, but I really don't care because it's under the car and they serve their purpose. So over here I have the hole for my oil filter. It could be over a little bit more, but it's not really a big deal for me. It works. And over here, this smaller hole allows me to access my drain valve just fine, and it will still clear whenever I drain my oil. So this is how I have it installed. I have 3 spacers along the front, which is what you need if you have headers or a drain valve like I do. But I chose to cut out a hole for the drain valve and the oil filter because otherwise I'd have to remove it every time, and that is a huge pain in the ass. So I have my brake parts all cleaned up, but before I get to the install on my pads and rotors, I'm actually going to be replacing my Endlinks for front and rear. As you can see, this is on the front. These are pretty much destroyed. They're gone. They are original OEM. So they're all ripped, and this is pretty much representative of all the other ones. They're all ripped or broken, and they definitely need replaced. So these here are Beatrush. I actually bought these 4 years ago and just never got around to installing them. I'm sure many of you could relate. You know, they were sitting in that box that we all have that holds our car parts until we install them. So those are going on the fronts, and I have these Kartboys which are going on the rears. Like I said, the rears are just as bad as the fronts, but I'm going to install these before I actually install my rotors so that it's easier to get to. So that's all I have planned for today. Like I said, I'm waiting on bolts to come in, and once they do come in, I can install my pads and rotors and then bleed the brakes. And finally, that should complete this whole brake install.
like I said, while the car was up, I might as well throw on a few other parts since I'm being held up anyhow. And I'm glad I did because they've been sitting in my garage for 4 years. So I guess I'll see you guys next video.